Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to this session on user-defined Python functions. Now before we understand how to create the user-defined Python functions, let's revisit the inbuilt functions that we are using in our previous session. So we have used inbuilt functions like length and print, but we never worried about how they are defined, who defined them, where they are defined in our Python environment. We are simply focusing on using them. So length functions actually gives you the length of the data type that you are passing to it as argument, and print function simply prints the message on the output screen. Next, we want to see how we can create a user-defined Python function. So to do that, you have to use the def keyword in Python followed by the function name, and then within this parenthesis you can mention the parameters. Then you can use a colon symbol to actually mark the end of your Python function header. Now as soon as you press enter after this colon symbol, your function body starts. Now we know in Python we use indentation instead of opening and closing braces, so this is your function body, which consists of different statements. Now this is how you define a function in Python, but to use that functions you actually have to call it. Now how you will call a function? It's as simple as that, by using the function name and passing the arguments. Now there are a lot of confusion between parameters and arguments, so I have given a very small note here which actually explains you that arguments are the values which are passed into the function and they correspond to the parameters in the Python function definition. Now it's not required to define parameters each and every time you define your function, but it's important that you include the parentheses here. So if you are not using any parameters, you can use the empty parentheses, but it's important to use the parentheses in your function name. So without any further delay, let's define our first functions, which is actually not accepting any arguments. So you can see we have empty braces here, and we are also not returning any values. Now do not worry about what a return statement in Python. We are going to cover that in detail very shortly. So here I'm defining my first function using the keyword def. The name of my function is print first message. Now this is usual my way of defining a function. I actually separate the word by using underscore, but you're used to whatever names you like, and then followed by empty parentheses and a colon symbol. Now as soon as I press enter after this colon symbol, you can see the indentation begin, and this is my function body. Here I can write my valid Python statements to create my function. Now these are very simple functions which actually using our inbuilt function print to print this message. So let's execute this cell. So you can notice here I'm not getting anything in the output. I'm not getting this message because this cell just defines the function. To actually get the output, I have to call my function with its name and followed by the empty parentheses. So I'm not passing any parameters or argument to this function for now. Once I execute this cell, you can see I'm getting the message which says my first message in Python. Next, we want to define a function which consists of one argument. So here again I'm using the def keyword. The name of my function is print argument, and this time I'm creating a parameter x and I'm simply printing it within my function body. Let's define this function. Again, I'm not going to get any output for now, but this time when I call my function, I'm going to pass the argument hi, which is of a string type. Once I execute this cell, you can see I'm getting in the output the message that I pass this argument from here. What if I pass an integer type to this function print argument? Let's execute this also. I'm also getting the output as 6. So we don't have to worry about the data type of argument that we are passing. Irrespective of data type, we are getting the output that we are looking for. Next, what I want to do is I want to assign the output of my function to a variable x, right? So let's do this and see that in the output we are getting 7, but when I actually try to print the value of x, I'm not getting anything in the output, right? So let's try to check the type of x. So we have seen the inbuilt function type, which actually gives me the type of my variable. So here I'm expecting actually an integer which should be assigned to x, but I'm not getting in the output. Now if I try to check the type of it, I'm getting it as none type. Now why this is happening? Because we are not returning anything in our function. We are simply printing a value. So let's try to understand what is the difference between the print and returning a value from your function. So the return statement in Python, it actually serves two purposes. The first purpose is it immediately terminates the function and passes execution control back to the caller. The second purpose is it provides a mechanism by which the function can pass data back to the caller. But here we are not able to pass data back to my caller, which is the x variable. That's why return is important. Now we'll define the same function. Well, let's use a new function. Let's say we are using square this function. In this square this function, I'm passing a parameter x, and I'm simply making or returning the square of that. So let's define this function, and this time when I call square underscore this function, I'm passing a number or an integer to that function, and you can see in the output I'm getting 9. Let's try to assign the output to a variable var, and let's see whether we get the value back in var variable or not. So this time I'm getting the output as 9, whereas earlier I'm not getting any output in the x. Also, if this time I check the type of x, I'm getting the output as integer, whereas earlier I was getting the output as none type. So it's clear now the difference between print and return. Return actually returns the value back to the caller, and it gives call back to your caller. That is the difference between print and return statement. Next, we want to understand the docstring in your function. So whenever you define a function, if you use this triple quote syntax and mention a message inside this will be useful for your user to understand what actually this function does, and this is known as docstring. It's actually a good programming practice to define a docstring for user defined function, so that whenever someone using your function, he gets some kind of hint what actually this function does. Now where your user will get this in, so let's say I want to use this function square this, and if I go inside the empty parentheses and press shift tab on my keyboard, you can see I'm getting a message, a helpful message here, and I have the second row as docstring, and here the custom message which I have return the square of a number is coming. So that's how the document string is useful for your function. Please use it whenever you define your user function. Alright, the next concept we want to know is the positional argument. So we are again defining a function, and this time I'm passing three parameters which are quantity, item and price, and I'm simply printing a message which will say that okay, this much quantity of a particular item I'm buying, and this is the cost of that particular item. Let's define my function and then pass the argument for quantity as 2, for item I'm passing apples, and for price I'm passing 3. Let's see the output. So the output says 2 apples cost $3, right? So these 3 are known as the positional argument. They have to be in the exactly same order in which you define the parameters. If you actually mess up the order, you won't get any error message, but the functionality of your function may not work correctly. So here I'm not getting any error which says that apple should be passed at the second parameter. I'm still getting the output, but this output doesn't make any sense for me. So in position argument, you have flexibility that the order you have, you can interchange the order, but again, your function may or may not work. So that is positional argument. One more thing with positional argument is you have to mention the exact number of arguments that you have defined, or the parameters that you define in your function. So if I execute this, you can see if I'm passing the less number of arguments, it is giving me the error that it has one required positional argument missing. Also, if I pass more number of argument, I will get the same message which says that it actually takes 3 positional argument, but you are passing 4. So this is the positional argument. Now the next is the keyword argument. So the keyword argument actually follows a key value pattern. So here the key is quantity and the value is 2, and you can use assignment operator to assign values to their key. Now here this actually solves my order problem, right? I cannot mess up the order if I'm passing proper quantity and their values, right? And here again, if I am messing up the order, but if I'm still using the item equal to apples, price equal to 2, quantity equals to 2, I'm still getting the correct message. So this assures that even if you are passing the arguments in a different way, your output or your functionality will remain intact. The two things which are still present with keyword argument, that you cannot pass less argument, or you cannot mess up with the spelling of argument. So here instead of ITEM, I mistakenly written ITM. So if I execute this, it's gonna say me that this ITM keyword argument is not present in the function and it is not expecting this. So these are the positional argument and keyword argument concept for you. Now let's define a more complex functions which actually gonna use some if-else statement inside the function. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 positional argument and 1 keyword argument in my function. The name of my function is calculator, or in short calc, and after this colon my function body begins. Now here what I'm doing is I have 2 positional argument for which I will pass value when I call my function, and I'm defining 1 keyword argument here, and the default value for that particular argument is addition or add in short. Now what I'm doing inside the function is, if the value of my operation is add, I'm simply going to return the addition of a plus b. If the option is subtraction or the operation is subtraction, I'm going to return a minus b. And if I'm getting any other operations, I'm going to simply show the message which says valid operations are addition and subtraction. Let's define this function by executing this cell block. And now I'm going to call my function by passing the three arguments. So for a, I'm passing 10, for b, I'm passing 4, and the operation that I want to perform, I'm using my keyword argument method here. So the key is op and the value is add. If I execute this, I'm getting 14 in the output. Now what happens if I don't pass my third argument, right? So as we have seen that we should get error because we cannot pass more or less argument to our function. Now here we have 3 argument. What happen if I pass only 2? I should get an error message, right? But no, we are not getting an error message because this time we have already defined a default value for our operation. So if I'm not passing anything during my function call, it will by default take the addition as the operation, and that's why in the output I'm getting 14. What if I, instead of using my, if I'm not using my key, I'm simply passing add, will it gonna still work? Yes, it's working. I'm getting 14 in the output. Now this time, instead of addition, I want to perform subtraction. So I've changed the value, and I'm also not using my keyword argument. I'm simply mentioning the value here. Again, in the output, you are getting 6. This time, instead of addition and subtraction, I want to perform division, but in my function I don't have any division capability, so I think our logic should go into the else block. Let's see what happens this time. Yes, I'm getting the message which says valid operations are addition and subtraction. The last thing for today is whether we can write 2 values from a single function or not. So you have seen in some programming languages we can only write a single value from a function, but in Python you can write actually 2 values from a single function. So let's define a function. The name of my function is minmax. I am passing a parameter which says nums, and then I'm using 2 inbuilt functions which are minimum and maximum, which is going to write the minimum and maximum values of this parameter nums. Let's define this function, and now I'm creating a list of the nums which says 1 2 3. So yes, instead of integers or strings, you can pass list or tuples also to your function. So this time I'm going to pass a list to my function, and in the output I should get the minimum value from this list, which is actually 1, and the maximum value of this list, which is 3. Also, when I'm calling this function, I'm assigning the output to a variable which says min-max of the number. When I execute this cell block, you can see the min-max number output is 1,3, which is the minimum and maximum value for this list. Also, if you have remembered tuples, you can see the min-max num is a kind of tuple because we can see the parentheses here, and this tuple actually contains 2 elements. So if it's a tuple, we can also use the tuple unpacking concept to unpack the values into minimum and maximum number and simply printing them. So here it says the minimum number is 1 and the maximum number is 3. Alright guys, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and happy learning.